Hi everyone, thanks for coming this evening. I think it's actually, testament to the power of AI as a buzzword that you've all come here in this sort of slightly gloomy, rainy Edinburgh weather today. We did a meetup last year on AI in financial services right here, and it was beautiful sunshine and a big audience like tonight. And I think we've replicated that again, even given the rain. So thanks everyone for coming in person, and also thank you for joining to those people who are listening into the live stream right now. Just before we get on to the real meat of the evening, I just need to say a few words on fire safety. So there are no fire drills planned this evening. If the fire alarm does go off, then please leave by the nearest fire exit, which you can see just there. When you get out of the building, you'll go to assembly point A, which is just down here. So if you look down these windows, just on the edge of the canal, there's a big green sign over there that says A. So that's where we'll all meet if there is a fire evacuation. As I say, no drills planned. So if the fire alarm does go off, please go out immediately. I'd also like to thank Live to Air, my old friend Alan Lloyd's sitting at the back with his camera set up, who's doing the live streaming tonight. I'm sure he's doing an excellent job, and those of you outside are already enjoying the live stream as we speak. I'd like to give a brief explanation. Oh, we're going across purposes here, aren't we? Why don't you go? I'll leave the keyboard alone. A brief explanation of what we're going to be doing tonight. So we're going to have 4 amazing speakers. I'll introduce you very briefly to them in a moment. Each one will do a very short introductory talk, and then we'll move to a panel discussion. I'll facilitate the first part of the panel discussion, and then we'll move to audience questions. So if you do have a question during the talks or the panel discussion, please save that until the very end. I'll let you know when we hand over to audience questions. We're going to have an open mic after that. This is a part of Data Lab community meetups where audience members get 30 seconds on the mic to make an announcement, promote a work or support request, or an idea for collaboration within the Data Lab community. So if you do have something that you'd like to mention to the community at the end, get your thinking caps on now, and I'll let you know when that point in the meetup comes around. Obviously, this event is set up by the Data Lab community. It's an online space with over 5,000 members from over 80 countries around the world, and it's designed as a space where data and AI professionals and enthusiasts can connect, collaborate, learn, and grow. And we wouldn't be here tonight without the Data Lab community. So if you're interested in joining and you're not already a member, it's free. You can join by scanning the QR code shown up here now, so grab a photo of that if you don't have it already. Right. So, introduction. We've got the topic tonight, AI and financial services. Financial services is obviously incredibly important to the UK economy. I believe it contributes around 10% to UK GDP and around 2.5 million jobs, according to a brief Google search that I did before this meetup. I think financial services, in a way, has been at the forefront of technology since the invention of counting. So I think this applications of AI today is a continuation of a very long journey in this field. We've got 4 really amazing speakers who will be joining us this evening. We've got Liz Marchenko, who's a data scientist at Lloyd's. She works with the idea of promoting data science and AI techniques and applications at the bank. We've got Alex Ripley, who's head of consulting at Talon UK and is responsible for leading and growing teams, responsible for developing innovative solutions to help financial services, in particular, dealing with some of those more challenging aspects of regulatory problems. We've got Lucy from FreeAgent, Group Product Manager. Lucy oversees the product function for a group of 5 teams with, in particular, an interest on how AI can be used to solve core user problems. So how that relationship between product and the more technical roles within data work together to solve user problems. So we've got James from NatWest Group, who leads a stream focusing on demonstrating value from the latest AI technologies, and we'll be talking a little bit more about some of the more technical aspects of the work tonight. So with that, I'd just like to please hand over to Liz, who'll be our first speaker this evening. If you'd like to welcome Liz to the stage.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Liz Marchenko, and I'm a data scientist in insurance, pension and investment part of Lloyds Banking Group. And I'm very, very excited to talk to you about the AI applications within the group. So as a bank, and much more than that, we have access to lots and lots of data that potentially can be suitable for a range of data science applications. And we do try to utilize this advantage, and we try to go hand in hand with advancements in technology. And so we work across the whole range of data science techniques. And mindful of the time, I'm going to just briefly cover some of the examples. For example, we could do something like complaints root cause analysis. So there we would utilize generative AI, so something that everybody's talking on about right now. And rightfully so. So if it's implemented correctly, it is very efficient, it's very innovative, and it can, with the help of AI in this question, we can process a much, much bigger set of complaints, summarize it, and then leave it for the human analyst to draw the conclusions from there. Something potentially a little bit easier and simpler in terms of the techniques is when we study how our customers interact with our website, our services, and this is what we do. Basically, it's based on statistical interference, right? So it's good old historical data analysis, and also it involves some regression modeling as well. And the main advantage of this is that it's very explainable. It's explainable both for us, it helps us as data professionals quicker and easier analyze if our solutions make sense, if the outputs are correct, but it also is very helpful for stakeholders and end users. If they have questions why and how a certain conclusion was reached, they can get an answer without going and being overwhelmed with technical difficulties. Another frequent example for financial services, fraud detection. So in itself, it's a classification problem. So, and this sort of systems can be very, very complicated. So it's mostly used as an assistant to the analyst rather than replacement for it. And the main thing that I want to focus my talk on is slightly different. So it is synthetic data creation. And you might be wondering why? I just said that we have a lot of data available. Why would we need to synthesize some data? And the answer is fairly, fairly simple. It's bias. And when we develop our solutions within the group, we do try to make sure that we do not disadvantage any particular group of people or businesses. We try to make sure that our outputs are not compromised, they're all inclusive. But it can be very hard. It is because data sets are often inherently biased. It could be for a variety of reasons: historical, social, economical, you name it. And it is also very, very important to remember that bias can apply both to individuals. So that's something that people usually think about when they think about the issues, when somebody is discriminated against because of their nationality or gender, for example. But it can also apply to the whole sector. So it can be disadvantaged as underrepresented, say, healthcare industry or agriculture industry or something like that. So this is exactly why we need to take great care and always think about bias, regardless of the granularity of solution we're developing. So having biased data set can lead to a variety of different results that we do not want to see. From the technical side of things, it can affect model performance and stability as well. But partly, maybe even more importantly, it can lead to unfair predictions and harm to both customer that put trust into our solutions and the brand as well. And it also can promote and reinforce harmful stereotypes that we as a community try to break. Right, so now we know that the bias is a bad thing, right? We know what to do with this, but how do we deal with this? So first of all, we can create a framework when we collect the new data now. We try to be as inclusive and as representative of the real modern world right now. But doing it this way, it will take years to accumulate the amount of data that we already have. And this is where the synthetic data comes into question. So this is where we try using synthetic data to mitigate for the biases in existing data sets. And just to put this into perspective a little bit, I want to walk you through a little bit of a use case that we recently explored at the group. And the premise is as follows. We have a classification model. It's on an industry level with two output classes. So you can view it as yes or no or something else. And when we were testing initial results, there was bias identified towards one of the group. So the team looked into it and found that one of the groups was heavily underrepresented in the data. So they wanted to attempt to generate synthetic data to make up for it, to mitigate the bias, and consequently improve model performance. And just a very quick shout out to the team. That was the work actually done by members of our graduate scheme while on rotation in Risk Foundation's platform. And unfortunately, I won't have time to go into technical details, but the results that I'm going to discuss in a minute were achieved using a combination of techniques, including context modeling, sequential modeling, and neural networks. So all of the AI buzzwords there for you, but it is a very complex process in itself just to prove a very, very important thing. So now when you have all of the background information, let's look at the graph. So on the graph over here, you can see the recall score. So basically how well the model predicts true positives for a variety of industries at a given point in time. And overall, when you look at it, you can see that the majority of the industries, so most of the lines, perform generally okay, and we're not focusing on the model performance in this talk, right? But industry one, highlighted on the graphs, definitely falling over. If all of the other industries have their recall score of about 0.6, 0.7, industry one has a recall score on average of 0.4, and it fluctuates a lot all over the place. So that is evidently, we can see that there is something going wrong. And as I said, we investigated underrepresented data, need to fix it. So now let's look at it again, but once the synthetic data for that underrepresented industry one was created. So the data that you see on the screen now, it was achieved after the model was retrained using the synthetic data for industry one and the real data for all of the other industries. And that's straight off the bat, you can see the improvement for industry one, and the overall recall score improved by approximately 0.1, while the trend is still there. So we know that it's still behaving as we would expect it. So it is actually representative of the real world data. And importantly as well, so industry two is an example, but all of the other industries also performed very similarly. You can see that the original data is actually the dotted line, and the synthetic data, so the new or updated model, is the bold line. So both of those lines for the other industries are very, very closely behind. So they almost match. So the effect on the performance of the model on other industries is quite negligible. And of course, we can work more on this. We can create more synthetic data that is more representative, kind of put more work on this. We can also fine-tune the model and make sure that the impact on other industries is minimized. But it is already a huge success because you can see the improvement for the underrepresented industry while minimal effect on the other industries. And kind of just to summarize everything that I've been talking on about, is that this experiment, while it was quite short, it definitely proved that the bias can be tackled with the synthetic data, and it can also apply not just for industries, but you can pick and choose any characteristic that you see the bias against. And it also shows that the synthetic data can greatly support creation of more robust and resilient models. So the performance across the industries would be roughly the same. But most importantly that I want you to think about is that it is still just the tip of the iceberg. So the solution is not perfect, primarily due to the volume of the training data for generating that synthetic data, but that's not all there is to it. But we want to continue working on this and create solutions that will mitigate that further, and so that we can deliver better, fairer results. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Liz. That was great. And we'll touch on some more of those topics, I think, when we get to the panel discussion part. So next, I'd like to hand over to Alex, please. So please welcome me in joining Alex for the stage.
So my name's Alex Ripley. I am the head of consulting for Talent UK. Well, it's not Talent, it's Talent UK. There's some sort of formatting thing there. So just a quick overview, you may not have heard of us, but 500 consultants in the UK, offices in Edinburgh. We've got 50 guys in Edinburgh. 200 of us in the UK specialise in data and analytics. And then across the globe, in 21 countries, we have 6,000 employees, headquarters in Paris. Great place to work as well. So yeah, we cover everything to do with data, so data analytics, AI, automation, cybersecurity, and advisory services, and more. In terms of our financial services credibility or credentials, we work across pretty much most of the financial services sort of sectors. And in terms of sort of projects we get involved in, They range from everything from sort of fintech solutions, martech, regtech, fincrime, fraud, regulatory change, that's a big thing. Data privacy underpinning a lot of what we're doing, and then customer insight analytics, remediation, redress. So it's a range of sort of subjects we talk about, and our clients, or some of them, are just highlighted there. So I think this links in quite nicely to what Liz was talking about. So in financial services, there's plenty of use cases out there, and I think some of you are probably working on some of these already. I think the key areas where we see customers sort of interested around customer, martech, marketing, financial crime, fraud, and regulatory tech. So customer already, we've seen a couple of those. Good examples: customer acquisition, onboarding processes, KYC, things like that. In marketing space, enhanced sort of segmentation, better decisioning in terms of your outreach to your customers. Fincrime and fraud, I think this is a real good area for sort of AI, the application of AI. A range of sort of examples there. And then in regtech, so regulation, this is where I'm going to talk about a use case that we've been working on with some of our clients. Again, we see really good scope for the use of AI here. I think it's a sort of ripe area. Okay, so in terms of one of our sort of case studies, we're working with some clients at the moment to implement a solution to help them, I guess, better manage, monitor, and evaluate sort of the regulatory compliance through the use of AI and other tools. The reason why this is a good sort of use case is it's very time consuming. Anyone who's worked in the reg sort of sector knows that working through this is prone to sort of error, it's time consuming, and it's hugely important. Compliance is really sort of the bread and butter for the banking and financial sector industry. Just give you a couple of examples. One of the clients we talked to, I think in their compliance team, every morning of every day of the week is spent reading through documents, websites, sort of letters and various things that come through. Another client mentioned that they have to go through 5,000 regulatory documents and regulatory changes per month and have to review those in the context of them just running their business, and that's in one part of an organisation. That's not the whole of the organisation. So this accelerator that we sort of developed alongside our clients is really there to monitor the data sources. So primarily this is going to be things like the FCA, PRA, other regulatory bodies, ingest the data there. It can also connect to internal data sources as well, so you can enrich that external regulatory information with your own sort of information you hold on your sort of compliance processes. We extract that and then model it. So we've got a large language model here that looks at that. Obviously, with training, we tag certain things along with the customer to help enhance and train that model. And then the other thing we're doing here as well is linking that to any sort of risk controls or obligations that they have in place already. Where they don't, obviously, they'll pop out into the actual output here, where we can visualize the output. So this gives the users a dashboard which shows them not just the impact of that regulation on their organization, but also which business area it affects and which team it should be passed to initially. So it makes that sort of initial sort of judgment. We pass it through workflow where it can be reviewed and tracked by the business. So the key thing here is that you have the human in the loop. So this thing doesn't make decisions on your behalf, but it guides you. So you can override this, you can feed this back in, and then the nice little green line here takes that feedback. So say you were an organization that felt that a particular regulation wasn't appropriate to your business, you could downscale the priority of that and the impact of that, or move it to a different type of team, feed that back into the loop. And then you can report on this. So all the data is tracked, so they've got an audit trail of this, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your compliance team are compliant and doing the right thing as well. So all that is tracked. So you can see here that 65% of regulated firms anticipate more regulatory obligations in 2024, but only 50% are investing more in this space. So there's a good market there. So the benefits of this, so intelligent automation, taking away some of the effort there, so using some of these new techniques and natural language processing helps identify and summarize the obligations in a way that makes the job far quicker, gets to the point, the pertinent points, without trawling through lots and lots of documentation. Data insights, so obviously we can pull a lot of information out of these documents and the data sources that may have been missed and bring that all together in one sort of place. it gives you a competitive advantage. So of course, this is, as we know, this is time consuming. If you are spending your time thinking about actually what you can do with your products to ensure that they're better suited for your customers rather than worrying about trying to interpret regulations, you can put that sort of time to better use. And clearly there's a time and cost saving here. So it really frees up time to help compliance teams, risk teams, to really sort of focus on the things that matter to them. Okay, and just going to close on some guiding principles. So I've talked about the use of AI to support organizations to work with regulation in a more efficient manner. But then AI itself, I think we all anticipate, will become regulated at some point. But some principles that we think are quite pertinent here. And if you're doing all of these, you're probably in a really good space. But certainly a lot of these relate to sort of some of the ethics and some of the controls that you'd expect to be put in place if you were going to be responsible and trust your AI solutions. So I won't go into those in detail, but there's also a placeholder for the ones that we haven't thought about yet that will be emerging. Okay. And that's it. So a quick sort of scan through a case study there. My contact details if you're interested, and I'll hand over to the next speaker. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks very much, Alex. Right, so we've got Lucy up next, so if you can please join me in welcoming Lucy to the stage. Thank you.
Hi folks, yes, I'll join Dave in welcoming everyone to our offices. It's great to see so many people here. So my name is Lucy. I work in the product function here at FreeAgent. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how we approach the AI hype within FreeAgent and where we've used AI in our product so far, just to give you a bit of examples there. But first of all, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about my emotional journey with AI so far, because we've all seen the headlines. AI is going to change the world. AI is the next internet. AI is going to make the planet turn the opposite direction. So it's kind of like, you know, there's a lot of stuff being thrown at us at the moment. And if I'm completely honest, my true reaction to this is this. I am absolutely whipped up on all the hype, and I'm like, oh my God, AI is going to change the world. I'm a product manager. My job is to find opportunity, okay? But there is also a part of me that's like, okay, wait a second. I probably, you know, making product judgments based on headlines is probably not the soundest methodology. I should probably look into this a bit more. And so that's where we get into, right, let's get down to business. What is real in AI? What's true between what the headlines are saying and reality? So this kind of all feeds into how do we approach all of this within FreeAgent. So for the next bit to make sense, I'll just give you a bit of an overview of what FreeAgent is for anyone that doesn't know. So we're accounting software for small businesses. So if you own a little coffee shop down the high street, or if you have an online web agency, or if you're a freelance data scientist, you need to submit taxes. You need to get all your data together and submit taxes several times a year. FreeAgent helps you with that. So it auto-populates all your tax returns and makes it really nice and easy, presents your data back to you, and helps you make decisions about your business. So that's what we do. So the next thing is, right, okay, so where can we use AI in FreeAgent? Well, first of all, by not starting with that question, okay? So as a product manager, you know, primary one of product management is don't start with the technology, right? We want to be thinking, what problems do our users have? And then, can AI solve them better than the existing solutions? So this is absolutely the way we try and approach it within FreeAgent. We always start with that first question. So with that first question, what are our core user problems? Well, we already have a really good idea of that. We speak to our customers constantly. We're constantly trying to figure out what are small business struggling with, what do they need help with. We know this really well. So as an example, job number one, small businesses need to get paid. They need to get the money coming in. Number two, if you've got money coming in, you need to file taxes. So these are some of the core things that we want to help our users with. The second question then is, can AI solve these problems better than what we have already? And this is where the kind of marriage between data scientists and product managers is absolutely essential. Because you've got the product managers on one side who have got a really acute understanding of what our customers need. And then you've got the data scientists on the other side that've got a really good understanding of the technical capability of AI. And it's only by going back and forward between these two departments and educating each other, bouncing ideas off each other, that we start to come up with the real high impact applications of AI. So some of the ways I'm just going to go over some kind of practical ways we've done this so far. So a really simple one is just having good debates about the headlines that are coming in. So this is a real life Slack conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago in our artificial intelligence channel. Apple announced that they're going to be including ChatGPT in future models. And I'm putting in the channel, oh, look at this, everyone, AI is going into Apple, it's going to be everywhere, it's going to be amazing. And then basically all the data scientists are like, Lucy, wait a second, you've not considered all this other stuff that we know about that you don't. And we end up just having, a really good debate. It gives us stuff to think about, and it helps us investigate, what the real stuff is behind the curtains. The second thing that's really important is helping product managers understand the kind of conceptual nuts and bolts of AI so that we can understand where it could be applied to solve our customer problems. So just a few weeks ago, this is Tobias, he worked with Dave, this is two of our engineers. They created a chat-based prototype. They did a presentation, presented it back to us, and just simply showed us like the architecture of how this works. But as a product manager, I can see, right, these are the building blocks of this AI application, and I can start to see, right, there's loads of other user problems this kind of architecture could help with as well. So this stuff's really, really important. And then the other thing I do is have a look at what does AI actually help me do now? So I'm sure you all have this with the tools that you use every day. Every couple of weeks, there's new headlines coming out. Notion's got this new AI feature, Slack's got this, Evernote's got this. So simply just looking in and properly investigating, does it actually help me? And what I've found is there's kind of three categories. Either it's a helpful application, but it's not accurate, so it's not that helpful. Or it's accurate, but it's not actually that much of a good use case. It doesn't help me. Or it is actually really helpful. And it tends to be a bit of a mix of that. So in terms of where we currently use AI and FreeAgent, basically we use it a lot. We've been using AI in our product since about 2019. It's something we've probably not shouted about as much as we should, and we want to shout about it, but really we've just been focusing on using it to solve problems rather than using it to look like we're using AI. But just to give you one example, if you're a small business, basically you join FreeAgent, you link to your bank account, and all your business transactions get imported into FreeAgent. So all the outgoing transactions, all the incoming transactions come in, and they need to be categorized. So you need to categorize them as accommodation or sales or travel or whatever it is. And you need to do that for two reasons. One, to make sure your taxes are correct, because different categories have different tax amounts. So that's one reason. The other reason is that if it's categorized, we can then present really useful information to you about your business that will help you make decisions. Problem is, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of these transactions. So you've got to go through them all the time, categorizing them one by one. So what we did is we basically created a kind of supervised machine learning algorithm, and we automated the guessing of this. So we trained it on the individual's past data and wider past data sets, so that now our system basically guesses the categories of all of these. And you as a user just have to go through, approve, approve, approve. So it's really nice and easy. We save our users loads of time doing that. We now have 60% of our imported transactions are categorized at 93% accuracy, which we're quite happy about. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm the one up here talking about this, but I just want to call out that all the work that's gone into the different parts of AI we've done is by these teams here. So obviously the data science team that Dave works with, banking experience and workflow are the product teams that took these things to market, and they were heavily supported by data platform, analytics, and core services. So big shout out to those guys. And yes, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lucy. That was great. And finally, for talks, we've got James from NatWest Group. So welcome, James.
Fantastic. Well, thanks all for joining. I'm James Thurgood. I'm a lead machine learning engineer at NatWest. I've been with the company for just around about 4 years now, and have the pleasure to be in a team where we work almost as an internal consultancy, and we work with other teams within NatWest to help bring AI and AI solutions to life, and generally innovate and do better for our customers. So to begin with, who is NatWest? For those that aren't aware, at the bottom right here, we've got each of the different various franchises. I certainly wasn't aware when I first joined NatWest how many franchises we had. So our colleagues here at FreeAgent are part of that wider NatWest group. And we have other subsidiaries, such as the Royal Bank of Scotland, Ulster Bank, and so on. Worth noting, I've pulled this slide from a deck from maybe a year or two ago, so the tildes and other things are maybe doing a bit of heavy lifting here, but hopefully it'll give you an idea of the size and scale of NatWest. We have 19 million customers, so a fair customer base, which, as you can imagine, drives a fair amount of data, which means that we have some really interesting and diverse data sets. We have around about 60,000 staff worldwide, approximately 3,000 models in production, and an ever-growing army of data scientists, data engineers, machine learning engineers, which at the time of writing this was around about 500, but is always growing. So for the next 5 or we've got 7 minutes left, I'm going to try and cover the applications of AI in finance, which maybe is a good idea, bad idea. You can be the judge. Whenever I hear anyone use the word term AI, I like to break it down into these boxes, which for those that have been in this topic for a while, have probably seen before. I'm going to use it to guide the rest of this talk. So at the top level here, we've got artificial intelligence, and within that, we've then got machine learning as a subset, deep learning within that, and then very fresh on the scene within the last couple of years, we've got this concept of foundational models, so pre-trained models. So we'll talk more in detail about each of them in turn. So first up, we have artificial intelligence, and looking at the definition, it's creating machines that simulate human intelligence and decision making. So before we get to our fancy algorithms or anything more, we can simply describe AI as a simple rules-based system. So a really common application here is in chatbots. So if you are a NatWest customer, then you've probably interacted with Cora, our external chatbot. We have a number of chatbots internally as well to help our colleagues as well. And this is a really good example of a rules-based system. You put in a query, a problem, and essentially what's happening behind the scenes is we're trying to match that one of your words to a keyword, and then you'll be sent down a pre-programmed user journey. So you can see on the screenshot here on the left, you've got a customer who'd like to update their details, maybe address, email address, etc. And by us picking up on those keywords, we can then send you down a journey, so you don't need to talk to a human who manually updates this. We can then do this in an automated way. So that's artificial intelligence at the highest level, and as we delve deeper, we get on to machine learning. So machine learning, the key difference here is that we aren't explicitly programming those if-else statements, and we can be a lot more diverse and learn from the diverse data sets that we have. So a couple of key areas where NatWest and many other finance firms will be using this. So one is credit decisioning. So the simplest example here is a scorecard. So when we're making lending decisions, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible manner, make sure that we're giving you an amount that is appropriate for your circumstances. So a really simple way of doing this is using our data to train simple models such as our logistic regression models, so we can produce a simple scorecard to reflect that decision. Another example, is, we've already heard this evening, is in financial crime prevention. So we can leverage all of our historical data to use maybe some more complex algorithms, such as maybe a random forest or others, to detect fraud and scams and potentially even forecast them in the future. And this often augments with this existing systems. As you can imagine, NatWest and other financial firms have quite complex estates. So we can then augment that into making real-time decisions, but also into making looking over historical data for investigation purposes. The final example I've got here is on identifying a customer's needs. With as many customers as I mentioned before, around about 90 million, you can imagine it's quite difficult to get a clear picture of what our customers' needs are and what they're asking for, etc. We don't have a human assigned to every single customer, unfortunately. I'm sure we'd love to do that, but we don't have the budget. So here we're essentially using machine learning to extract out all of our various communication channels. So that's either through Cora or when you phone in, or even if you go into a branch, to essentially extract the user intents and needs. So one example of this is using machine learning to identify our customers that are in financial difficulty, and then identify them and prioritize them by those that are most in need of support, so we can make sure that support is provided in a timely manner. Another example is a fairly large piece of work that was conducted a year or two ago to create customer lifetime value models. So this essentially is for calculating the customer value to us as a bank and then forecasting that in the future. And the real driver behind that is that it allows us to make product recommendations to you to meet you where you are within your life. So one of the things we do within that is segment you into various different segments. And based on that segments, we can then recommend appropriate products to you. So one of the feedbacks we got when we were doing this was one of our relationship managers who was speaking to a client when we were trying this, and they're like, this intervention came at a perfect time. And behind the scenes, that's because we're using these diverse data sets to pull in and make sure that we send information when it's most useful. Going down the rabbit hole further, we've got deep learning. You lose some transparency here in terms of the model, but as you go further in, you get a lot more better performance. One example of how we're using this is with embeddings. So if you haven't heard of embeddings, a really good way of describing it is in pulling out semantic meaning. So on the bottom left here, we have a very classic example, is if we create embeddings for given words, we can do simple maths with words. So for example, if we do king plus woman, we should find a value very close to queen. And to bring that back into a financial sense, you can create simple embeddings like this to do maths and problems and train models on data you wouldn't have otherwise been able to. So in the top left, we've got a visualization of a network. As you can imagine, in NatWest, we have lots of network type problems in terms of financial transactions and the like. We can do this with contact information and also transactions. And this produces us an embedding space, which we can then go on to train and use in further downstream models. And finally, we get into the right at the bottom in terms of foundation models. So with the rise of generative AI, with ChatGPT and other models, there's lots of models now available that have been pre-trained, which are applicable to a wide range of tasks. So just to give you a flavor of some of the things you can be doing with these is, coming back to the first slide on chatbots, they're very rigid in the way that they're programmed. You must go down that rules-based system. So we're using techniques such as retrieval augmented generation. We can use our customers' queries to search documents, pass that onto a large language model to then bring back a more conversational way of on a given topic. And one other potential output of this is, for example, summarizing our customer interactions. Again, we had that previously on a slide, but with large language models, with it being in the name, language models, they're very good at summarizing and condensing our customers' needs. And finally, it goes without saying that across the bottom, one of the key things with large language models is ensuring that we have content moderation, or guardrails as it's often referred to. And this is making sure that the large language models are acting as it would, as you'd expect almost a NatWest colleague to. You might have seen some high-profile examples out in the wild where they've maybe gone astray and the like. So that was a whistle-stop tour of finance and AI. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, James. That was brilliant. Okay, so thanks to all of our speakers. I'd like to invite our four speakers to come and join me on the stage just now for the panel discussion, and we can take our places just here. Oops. Try not to be too awkward sitting out the front here. So thanks, everyone. That was really interesting. If we could begin just by calling back to your talk at the start, Liz. I mean, you mentioned a couple of different modeling approaches, some of the more traditional approaches like regression and some of the more modern machine learning approaches that are used in artificial intelligence. Where do you think the right balance lies between, explainability and bias? When would you know to choose one approach or the other, and how would you think about that problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the balance is somewhere in between. It depends on the use case that you're thinking about. Some of the solutions, especially now when the AI is that frightening thing to people, we might want to take a much more cautious approach, because when we explain that the solution was derived using historical data and everything else, it brings up a lot more, and people trust us a bit more, because we're not just assigning it to the machine to do the decision for them. I imagine if we, for example, talk about decision of whether or not the person would get credit or something like that, we, as a person, as a customer, I myself wouldn't be very comfortable if some machine decided that for me. But if it was a human who decided it, but it decided quicker with the help of AI, that would be definitely much, much better. And obviously, if you get a decline or anything like that, you can always appeal. And having that opportunity to appeal the machine learning solution, the AI-driven result, is where the key value lies.
Okay, so you think it's about delivering that value faster. If you can show that benefit to the customer, they'll understand.
Faster, but then also making sure that the customer feel comfortable with the solution that we deliver to them.
Thanks, Liz. I mean, it's obviously a very detailed discussion, and maybe some of the audience will come up with questions on that later on. If we can move on, Alex. I mean, you mentioned in your talk about, the human in the loop. I mean, you mentioned human in the loop for those who are not familiar with that idea of, let's say, a system where an AI generates an answer and then a human validates that before it's actually acted upon. I mean, in the regulatory space, where do you think we are on that journey, let's say, of getting to full automation? Do you think that's something we'll ever reach?
I think we'll get to a point where we're close, but I don't think we'll see the specialists who ultimately need to make the decision on behalf of an organisation being completely replaced by a decision-making tool. I think the regulatory space is a good example where you could go quite far, because regulations themselves have to be very, very clearly defined. There's talk about the FCA and PRA making their documents machine readable, so that tools can read them and therefore be very clear and precise in terms of the interpretation of the information in those documents, yet they're still human legible as well. So I think in the regulatory space, something where it's quite clear cut, then you could get close to that. But then if you start to bring in or augment other data that may, stuff that you've generated or customer generated or third party, I think that's where you would lose that, you would still want to have that control and that sort of oversight.
You've actually brought up something that leads on to a question I was going to ask later, so I'll jump right ahead to that now. I mean, you mentioned about the idea of making some of that regulatory documentation more machine readable, and I think there's this interesting idea right now that in the AI space, a lot of the problems we're solving are almost like problems that we've created for ourselves. So, okay, some regulator has created some very complicated documentation which is difficult to understand, so we need an AI system to help us understand that. But you mentioned about, the idea of making that more machine readable. I mean, can you foresee a world in which, some of this will sort of go away? Will AI provide an entirely different interface that bypasses that documentation entirely, or is that sort of wild thinking?
I think that's probably optimistic, because I mean, the regulators are probably keen to do this because they want they want people to follow it, I guess, properly, follow the guidelines. Other industries and sectors will be generating so much data, so much information at such a pace that they probably won't be at the front of their mind to be that considerate. So I guess with the AI will probably always be playing catch up to a degree, I'd say.
Thanks. I mean, Lucy, what you were talking about in terms of how actually we sometimes represent what we're doing with AI, in FreeAgent, and I think what Liz was saying about how we explain to customers, what's actually happening. I mean, what's your perspective on, the average sort of financial technology user, where they are with their understanding of AI today and what it actually means?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely in recent years it's changed. So, AI has been a word that's been around for a while, but I think since ChatGPT came out, it is everywhere. And, I think the average Joe on the street now knows what that is, or knows what that can do, knows that that's a big, exciting thing that's changing the world, or that's their perception of it, more than they did, say, like 5 years ago. And I think it probably is like changing an expectation for customers. Like, I think this is just a guess, but my guess is that, if a customer sees something that's got AI in it, they'll probably think, oh, that's good. That's a good thing. And there's obviously a lot of kind of wariness about AI as well, and the kind of use of data. But I think, on the whole, there will be people that see tech and think that's a good thing. So I don't think companies like ours should be leading with that. Like, I don't think using AI as our main selling point is definitely not. Our main selling point with FreeAgent is that we solve really important user problems. But I definitely don't think we should be hiding the fact that we're using AI. I think we should just be saying, we're using AI, but we're using it to solve your problems rather than using it as a marketing gimmick, I suppose.
I think it's really interesting what you said about it becoming maybe a bit of an expectation. But I mean, as James said, an AI system isn't necessarily using machine learning, and many AI systems in production today aren't using machine learning. So it becomes quite an interesting point where, you know, what actually happens versus what's being sold are maybe becoming a little bit divergent. But if the customer gets the problem they want solved, then presumably they're happy either way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you know, you do hear of companies saying they're using AI, and then, you know, when a data scientist looks into it, they do see that it's probably not AI in that sense. But yeah, I think as long as the customer's getting their problem solved, I think that's fundamentally the most important thing.
I mean, moving on to James, I mean, when you talked about, you know, again, a variety, you had your sort of, you know, succession of narrowing down, you know, within the space, obviously starting at the most general and getting right down to foundation models, and that's obviously something that your team's working on quite actively within the bank, you know, applications of some of that cutting edge technology. I mean, how do you sort of explain the opportunities around the latest developments in technology to some of the business stakeholders that you're dealing with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I suppose historically, I've been in the team about 4 years, and interestingly, initially we were going out to businesses trying to sell it to them with all the different opportunities. So there was a lot of hesitancy initially with businesses, because they're like, oh, this is automating it all away, it's not going to make bad decisions, it's not 100% accurate. But then when you actually go through their existing business processes, you're like, well, actually, the human manually doing this process, they're not 100% accurate. So it's then just trying to bring it back to their existing way of working and then going forwards. What's been interesting with the rise of generative AI is we're having a lot of businesses come to us now and say, well, actually, we've seen this really cool thing out in the wild and within these different tech firms. Can we do that? And I suppose for us, the main thing is always bringing it back to that existing process, the existing metrics. They're still good metrics, they're still good processes. We just need to show there's an analogy there, bring them on the journey, and then make sure that they're happy with that risk or switching over.
Thanks. I mean, I think that relates again to some of the stuff you were saying, Alex, earlier on, you know, in the regulatory space. And I'm quite interested to understand, you know, taking particularly James's point about humans not being 100% accurate either, you know, how do you build that trust among your stakeholders that the AI system is actually triaging the documents and making the correct recommendations, or at least correct enough?
Yeah, I think some of this within data comes down to your trust in data before you get your trust in AI. So again, I think there's a lot of people wanting to jump from still doing stuff in spreadsheets to then having an AI solution and thinking you can do that in one very, very big and sort of optimistic step. So I'd probably take it back, you know, a step before there and say, okay, well, have you got trust in data? Do you understand its, you know, the quality, the lineage? Have you defined your data properly before you start putting it into your AI models and then getting some surprises at the other end? But yeah, I think there's probably some use cases where you could make that quick step, even experimentally. You could probably do that. But I think within financial services, I'd say probably be a little bit more cautious before you do that. Although things like the synthetic data and the way, you know, these things are ways of overcoming some of those sort of inherent challenges with it that we all have with our sort of the data sets that we're working with.
I think it's really important to bring it back to the fundamental good data quality. I mean, we've all sort of heard the garbage in, garbage out statement, you know, that we need to avoid. So I think that's incredibly important. And it also speaks to this idea, I think, which is something that I think about maybe quite a lot, is how we communicate uncertainty to our stakeholders. I mean, as a scientist, you know, we've sort of got the idea of random uncertainty and systematic uncertainty, and that brings me back to a question I think for Liz on the synthetic data, where we're using synthetic data, you know, we're generating another data set. How do we make that trade-off, say, between increasing the size of our data set from an underrepresented population versus the potential for bias in what that synthetic data then looks like?
Yeah, so when trying to generate synthetic data, we definitely have to be super cautious, because we can generate synthetic data that will be biased in itself, right? So we need to take a cautious approach, we need to test it, we need to validate it. And I think that's kind of an iterative process of just going into it, seeing that it actually represents the real data that we're trying to synthesize, so that it's not just a random piece of data points instead, and it actually corresponds to what we're trying to do. And it all comes down to testing, to validating things over and over again until we reach that point when we are happy. Because obviously there will be cases in all of the solutions where something would go wrong. Nothing, as James mentioned, even humans are wrong, so it's bound to happen. But we need to make sure that it happens early enough or it doesn't affect everything. And if it does, this is the time when we need to go and take a step back and see, is that actually the right step to take? Or do we need to rethink the approach, redo it again? Because while we aim for the good, we need to actually make sure that we achieve the good.
I think that collective shared understanding is super important. And I think there's a question I'd like to put to Lucy on that topic, just changing tack very slightly. But I mean, it puts it in my mind, you know, a lot of these conversations can become quite technical. And I mean, Lucy, in your talk, you mentioned about, you know, that interaction between the technical data science teams and the product teams. I mean, where do you think the onus lies there? Do you think that product managers need to become more technical? How in-depth an understanding of the techniques that we're using do they need versus, you know, should the onus be on the data scientists to learn to speak the product language and to explain their work more clearly? I mean, where do you think we are today and where do you think we need to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think in terms of onus, I really think it has to be a joint effort. And I think, you know, that's something that we've tried to do in FreeAgent. And you know, in terms of the level of understanding, you know, as product managers, we don't need to know how the code works. We don't even need to know what language you're writing in. We don't really need to know a lot of the technical nitty-gritty. What we really care about is sort of that conceptual level of what kind of problems it can solve. So, you know, having themes of problems that the AI can solve is really, really useful. So, so for example, like predictive algorithms, you know, that concept of a predictive algorithm, it can predict what this bank transaction could be. It could predict whether a customer is going to churn next week. Just that concept of prediction is like, oh, that gives you an idea of, oh, this problem could be solved for customers, this problem, or whether it's, you know, something else like a ChatGPT model or whatever other types of models there are. But yeah, having those conceptual things with examples of the types of problems they can solve really helps generate ideas from the product manager side. And I definitely think the onus is on us to listen and to learn on that side as well.
It's definitely a sort of team effort, isn't it? It's got to become a team effort if we want to be really successful and be building the right things and understanding what we're building.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, in terms of like practical tips, if you're a data scientist in a company, like do a roadshow with your product managers, go around beating the drum, educating, get feedback. How much did you understand that? How much did you not understand it? Adjust it, go around again. And then what I'd hopefully see happening is that then the product managers are coming back and saying, well, we've got these ideas based on what you told us. And, you know, that's what I mean about that ping pong, that back and forth that I think can work really well.
I think that's really, really useful tips.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
I think you've raised a very, very good point. It's all about the communication between the teams. And when approaching any sort of solution, and kind of bringing back to my previous answer, when we know what would be the good, how do we approach this, is that we always need to keep the communication going. So sometimes you can find unexpected subject matter experts. So talking about synthetic data, somebody could have studied specific, I don't know, worked in a specific area, and they know the data, they know how the people behave, and so you can always share it with them and confirm it with them. So the communication when developing data solution or AI solution is definitely key, and a lot of people try to ignore it until it's way too late. But if you keep the good communication throughout the delivery process, the development process, that's where you get the best results. Yeah. Sorry.
Definitely. No, definitely. Thank you. If I could just change the topic again now slightly. Alex, what do you think about the idea of AI upcoming, you mentioned it very briefly in your talk, upcoming AI regulation? I mean, where do you think we are now, and you know, what do you think, what can you see coming and changing in the next few years, and do you think that will impact, you know, the way we approach AI problems?
Yeah, I mean, there's the EU AI Act sort of being drafted and that's coming around. So I think it's inevitable that there'll be more regulation before well, there'll be more regulation. You never really take it away that much. I think, I mean, that's why I put the sort of the principles at the back, you know, the back of this, the pack, because Up until then, I think we still need to, communication is a big part of this. We still need to be responsible with this, probably even more responsible than we have been with any of our other sort of data-driven solutions that we've launched there. We've had credit risk models running for years, deciding whether we can get a loan or a mortgage, and we sort of accepted those. But we're going sort of well beyond that sort of world now. So I think the key thing is going to come down to the point when we figure out who's accountable or what's accountable, what legal entity, be it a person or a corporation, whatever. I think once that is understood, and then from there, I think you'll find that lots of teams looking to develop AI-driven products will pay a lot more attention to understanding them, the transparency, the sort of controls they put in place, and also the purpose. So yeah. So I think yeah, regulation will be coming, but when and how we adapt to that, I'm not quite sure.
Thanks. And I mean, Liz, going back again to how this relates to bias. I mean, how do you think we go about? Do you have any advice for the audience on detecting possible problems, or where would you go and look for possible problems, before they've let's say become a real problem?
Yeah. So most of it will be evident already because most of the data science solutions, when you do 80% of the work, I think you can agree with me there, James, is that 80% of the work is just data cleaning, data preparations. It's all about the data, and kind of ties nicely to the fact that we need to know our data first and foremost and be confident in our data. And when we do this extensive studies on there, this is where you usually would notice some things. And you would look out for tiniest little, even if it bothers you just a tiny little bit, it's better to be safe than sorry, right? And this is the approach that I go for. Then on the level when you build the solution, even if it's an initial model with no tuning or anything, you can clearly see that something's going wrong as well most of the time. And then once you actually build the solution, you repeat the same process all over again just to make sure that there's definitely all correct. So, yeah.
Thanks, Lucy. I think that's great advice. What I'm going to do now, just for the last 5 minutes or so, I'm afraid I'm going to put you all on the spot a little bit. And I'd like to ask each of you in turn if you've got any predictions, any worries, concerns, opportunities that you can see coming up in the future. Where do you think things are going to look in, let's say 5 years' time? I mean, James, for example, you mentioned in your talk about foundation models. We know that at this stage models are getting bigger in terms of the amount of data that's being trained, but maybe technology fundamentally hasn't changed that much. I mean, do you think there's going to be any changes coming down the line in the next 5 years or so?
So I suppose I should disclose at heart I'm a skeptic. So whenever I see these big headlines and things, I always take them with a pinch of salt, similar to I think some of the other presentations we've heard today. I think there generally will be big changes in the way that we do things. But I think it's just going to be a gradual evolution of the road that, to be honest, most finance firms have already been on for the past decade. We've already been integrating machine learning into a number of different applications. And from my perspective, I see that just being a continuation. Yeah, a lot of firms are probably shouting out AI a bit more, get the buzzword in there so it's maybe a bit more noticeable to customers. But from my perspective, we're just on that continual wave of integration. And from my perspective, as we go on that journey, it's making our customers' journeys better, we're understanding our customers better, and only by doing that and only by making sure that our metrics and the like are showing that, can we then continue on that journey. So,
thanks, James. On to Liz.
Yeah, thank you. So I mostly agree with James. I don't think there will be a huge revolution in the next 5 years. And as James mentioned again, financial services, we're using machine learning techniques, AI techniques for a while now. So I think the next 5 years or so, especially with a lot of hype around AI, people are becoming more conscious, more cautious about it as well, because it's everywhere. All of the very, very loud headlines could be quite frightening. So I think, in my point of view, the businesses will not take a step back, but they will think through and rethink certain solutions instead of kind of jumping on the train, especially for something as important as financial services that affect every aspect of every single person's life. We need to be very, very careful and not just to jump on that hype train, but actually make sure that the solutions that we deliver are beneficial for the customers. They're not not disadvantaging them in any way, coming back again to bias and safety regulations, and just make sure that every solution that we put out there is regulated, it is protected, it's safe, secure, and that it's generally still in line. So we don't want to fall behind on the progress, but we do want it to be very responsible.
Very important, I think. I think we'd probably all agree about that. Thank you, Liz. Do you have something to add, Alex?
I think in 5 years we won't be talking about AI because it'll just be what's happening. So 10 years ago, it was all about big data. We don't talk about big data. So it'll just be part of the fabric of what we do, working with data. So I think 5 years, it'll be another subject that we're here talking about.
It's like a continual wave of hype cycles.
Yeah, no, I mean, similar to what other folks have said, I think, yeah, if you look at the curve of how much people are talking about AI versus the curve of how much AI is actually helping people more than it was before, it's quite different. But I do think that curve is kind of going up, like it's a continuation. I do think there's a lot of opportunity for AI to solve problems in new ways. I think the risks come with, the regulated side, like you're saying, Liz, but also not just the regulated side, but just getting it wrong for customers. Like, we don't want to tell them the wrong thing. We might not be breaking the law, but we might be giving them rubbish advice, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to give them something that's incorrect that either damages our brand or has a negative impact on them in any way. So yeah, just making sure we manage that risk at every release is really important.
Thanks very much. A few key predictions there. Does anyone have any final remarks that they'd like to add just now before we open things up to audience questions? I can see at least one eager hand going up, potentially others. Why don't we start with the audience questions, please? Okay, we need yeah.
There is lots of regulations, new regulations coming up in Europe and in the UK as well, particularly on data privacy and fairness and bias. So my question is there any more research on the techniques to tackle fairness and bias? Because today we have heard about synthesizing underrepresented data sets, but I know of other techniques, for example, counterfactual fairness. So is there any research being made towards tackling fairness and bias? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Definitely, a great question. I think you might have gathered that I'm very passionate about mitigating bias in the data. There is definitely always ongoing work within the industry, within academia as well, within Lloyds Banking Group specifically, where we look at different ways to mitigate for it. It could be, sometimes it could be as simple as just choosing a different solution. If we can't find a way to mitigate for the bias and we see that the solution that we're developing may not perform as well, the good thing to do would be just to step back and try a different solution, trying to see what's happening. Maybe phrase the question a little bit different. That also will affect a lot of things, because bias could be a little bit tricky, right? It could be very in your face. It could be not so much in your face. So kind of just trying to explore this, trying to see what solutions work for the data that we work specifically on, what solutions don't. Sometimes you would get the solution where you wouldn't observe any impact at all, which is great. But sometimes, yeah, as I said, sometimes you have to take a step back, have to consult with the wider business as well, get the thoughts together, and maybe ask, okay, what's the research been done in the academia and everything, because that's been done all over the place. Maybe also ask for advice and see what our colleagues within the financial sector are doing as well in that space. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Do we want to expand on that a little? We have another question here.
As I see, financial sector use our data, our financial data quite heavily to analyze our behavior. And do you think should be any regulation on this matter? Because, for example, can I exclude my data from analysis, from, for example, any kind of, like, because nowadays we don't ask our users, like, whether we can use their data or not. Like, normally we just have this data and use it to train our models. Yeah.
I'll quickly answer it and then maybe pass over to you, because there are definitely ways you can withhold your data for being used. Is a GDPR? There are certain regulations in place where you can just contact.
Some data is not PIA data. So personal identifiable information, of course, it is not used for due to regulation purposes. Yeah, but the other, like, just transactions, some kind of, like invoices, not
so your
PIA
transactions
data.
would be linked to you as a person when we look at the data, right? So, and you can.
For example, it's not personal information, it's a company information, and of course they have this transaction imported or via integration with the bank. So it's obviously we have some kind of data. We can train our models.
Yes.
But yeah,
when when we approach the data solutions, I think the main principle that everyone stands by is that we only use the data for the purpose that it was collected for. So if it was collected for one specific purpose, we don't have any right to use it for a different purpose. And then when the data is collected, you're usually notified in terms of like terms and condition how your data could be used. So it is in there most of the time. But just coming back to how you can withhold if you don't want your data to be used in any sort of experiment, as long as there is a way to link it back to you, you can contact any company and they will be obligated to return. I agree with you. Yeah. Do you mean something like how you interact with the website? So, for example...
No, it just... Financial sector is a huge amount of data. For example, NatWest, like, have a huge amount of data.
Yeah.
Like, and not all this data are personal. But they still use it for training their models.
Yeah.
And there is no real way to exclude.
I think
just maybe it's not a question like for now. Maybe it's for future a little bit.
I think it's something that in the future we'll probably need a facility to be able to do that. I think there's technically, and then there's the actual legal side. There are two sides of that. I don't know if Alex has something to add.
It's an interesting idea because they've collected your data because you have signed up for a service or a product or something. So somewhere within those T's and C's that we all read, I'm sure, there may be something that says that your data can be used for other purposes, analytical purposes, to help enhance their products and services that they provide to you. In marketing, we can see that there's a lot of work around the sort of PECA directive in terms of e-privacy, in terms of consent for sort of marketing purposes. I very much see that in the future there'll be additional consent that you'll need to seek to allow an organisation to then use all the data, not just your personal data, but the other data that's generated through the use of their services and platforms. So that's probably the way we're going to see it. But I guess it's the cost of using or signing up to these products, isn't it, that they have that data.
Great. Do we have any other questions from the audience, please?
Thanks for your presentations. They're really good. Thank you. Maybe a question for everyone. It was actually as the models are getting less explainable and you have to use a bit more subjective judgment when you're doing things like synthetic data, who ultimately signs off in your business that they are fit for purpose?
So I suppose from the perspective of NatWest, one of the key things we have with any model is we have an independent model evaluation process. So we have an independent risk function that will go through every model and give it a grading. One of the components within that is to challenge you. Why have you chosen that particular model? Couldn't we have gone for a really simple model? So in my presentation, I went through the various different levels, and for our scorecards, for when we're making lending decisions, we need to have the most transparent model there is, so that we can explain to our customers why. But in other certain situations where maybe there's less of a need for explainability and actually there's a real benefit by going down that more complex avenue, there might be a right justification. But I suppose in summary at NatWest, we always do try and keep it as simple as possible, but then there are times when a more complex model might provide better value, which would give us just cause.
So it sounds like it's really all about finding that trade-off again that we've been talking about a little bit earlier in the conversation. Does anyone else have anything to add on that topic? Shall we move on to any more questions from the audience? Okay, got two at the back row, next to back row.
Sort of related to that question about, I guess it was like Alex mentioned accountability before, and one of the techniques, as you mentioned, was the human in the loop. And I was just thinking, as people trust AI more, I mean, I sort of see people using Copilot on a basic level in very different ways, and I think the lazy human in the loop is a risk. And how do we safeguard against that? That's my question.
Yes, there's always a risk. Like anyone in an organisation could upload sensitive information on something like Copilot or ChatGPT, and then you don't know where it goes to. I think it comes down to the sort of roles and responsibilities. So, in financial services, again, it's regulated. We're professionals. We expect to hold ourselves to a high level of sort of conduct. So there are always controls in place for a lot of the jobs and roles we do within financial services anyway. So I guess it's just, I wouldn't say that people become lazy because they've got access to these tools. They probably just find that they become a bit more efficient. But again, there's talk about guardrails being put in place. So we still need to consider that. Still need to consider our personal responsibility and ethics when we're using these tools, as we do now with other technology. Is there a solution to that? I guess more education, better understanding of what the impact could be if you get this wrong, because these things aren't always going to stop you doing something. You may have to put more sort of controls around them, more authorization and things like that. But I guess for where we are now, it's fairly open what you could do with this, so that there are risks that we need to be aware of. I think those risks are probably, I guess, increase as people become more comfortable, more familiar with these things. So yeah, maybe education is a key factor here.
Thanks very much. I think we've got time for one final question, possibly one from your row, if you pass along to your right. Thank you.
Hello, your sessions have all been really good. Thank you so much for them. We've spoken a lot about how AI is changing financial services and how we shape the worlds that our users kind of act in. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how users are going to use AI to interact with our services and products. So, perhaps how they use them to make savings and investments decisions, things like that. So, how they might read information, how they might process it, how they might make choices, and then ultimately how they act on those choices.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that's a good one. I do wonder because obviously like chatbots now, right? So people are asking questions of chatbots, and it could be related to things like insurance or credit, etc. I wonder if people are maybe less trusting of those now than the information they would get from just like a web page of information, because there are so many case studies where it's like someone asked a chatbot something and they said something ridiculous or it was wrong. So I wonder if there's even more skepticism now against chatbots than there was against the sort of traditional form of communicating information around those things. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more expectation that there will be some kind of ChatGPT based function that they can use. How that'll evolve in the next few years, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up the panel discussion. So please join me in thanking our brilliant panel one more time. Okay, now you've all been pre-warned, and I think the panelists, you're welcome to join the seats if you'd like, or you're welcome to stay there if you're comfortable. But we've now got the one point which was advertised earlier on. I think we'll move to the open mic part. If there's anybody from the community who would like to make any 30-second announcement at this point, then you are welcome to. Okay, we've got a couple.
C.G. Lambert, Adventures in Analytics. C.G. Lambert, Adventures in Analytics. C.G. Lambert, Adventures in Analytics. Available now, Amazon.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Neville, and I'm running an event in the Bay Centre in September, the 25th of September, and I'm needing volunteers, potentially from this audience, to come along for 1 hour. Effectively, it's an event which we ran for the first time last year, which allows 5th and 6th year pupils and some undergraduates, so people aged 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, to come along and just sort of do a bit of a speed dating event. And you basically would be the mystery guest, one of about 10 or so mystery guests, and they would spend 5 or 10 minutes trying to find out what you do. And then you move on to the next person. And the aim of the event is to basically bring pupils who have yet to make decisions about what they might study and what career they might do, to make an informed choice as to whether they want to go into the world of data and statistics. I've got some flyers here and a website that tells you loads more, and I'm more than happy to tell you more details. But the event needs mystery guests, and we will provide all the people to come along and quiz you on the evening. Sorry again? Is it by the Data Lab? It's on the Data Lab website. It's on their events page. It's being run by the Royal Statistical Society Edinburgh Local Group. I'm the treasurer of that particular local group. As I say, we ran it for the first time last year, and it was a great success, and we're going to be running it this year, and also it's going to be running Glasgow this year as well. So it's growing rapidly. In other words, it's doubled in 1 year.
Do we have any other announcements? Okay, great. Well, with that, we'll just do a final brief wrap-up. I think we've got, so I'll just finish by saying if this event hasn't convinced you enough, I'll add that you should join the Data Lab community if you haven't already. There's a QR code just up there which you can scan to get through to the registration page. I'd also like to call out that on the 17th of July, there'll be a meetup at the Bayes Centre on net zero, which I think I would certainly agree would be a fascinating topic. So I hope that some of you are able to make it along to that not next month, next month. Yeah, we're not quite in July yet. Okay, and with that, why don't we thank our panel and ourselves for attending tonight against the rain with a final round of applause. I think we can now move to the cafe area out there for maybe a final slice of pizza and